Bolo Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Gurudev ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Parampara ki jai, Shri Seva Kunj ki jai, Jai Jai Shri Radhe Shyam. So this morning we memorized verse 12 of chapter 2, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva nabhavishyama sarvevayam ataparam. So this is Krishna's bold declaration, beginning discussion of the nature of the soul, Atma Dharma, as a very essential and important cornerstone of our belief system in Bhakti Yoga. Krishna says, never was there a time when I did not exist. First, Krishna is establishing his own eternality, Satchid Ananda. Then he says, Jatunasam. Naasam. Never was there a time when I did not exist. Naasam. Natvam, nor you. Neme Janadipa, nor these Janaadipa, kings or rulers of men. Nachaiva na bhavishyama, nor in the future shall they ever cease to be. Sarvevayam ataparam, they will always be existing. So Srila Gurudev gives a very interesting commentary and a very beautiful point that I'll jump to. The idea of what is dear, what are we attached to? And there's a very interesting example he gives. Parikshit Maharaj asked Sukadeva Goswami, O Brahmin, Sri Krishna was not born to the parents of the other cowherd boys. How is it possible for those parents to have such unparalleled love for him, a love they did not even have for their own children? It's interesting that Gurudev talks about this within the context of this verse, because Krishna is also trying to establish more than just the knowledge of the self, but relationship to him. That's kind of the purpose of the Gita in essence, in the Bhagavatam. How to develop relationship with the absolute truth. And then when we do that, we naturally come into harmony with everything. So the importance of understanding that Krishna is the self of the self. And so they talk about Vedantic and Upanishadic teachings that say, the wife is not dear for the sake of the wife, or the husband is not dear for the sake of the husband. It's only dear for the sake of the self. And so that there are objects that are I, and then there is objects that is mine. Not objects, but there is the I, and then there is the mine. And the I is always more dear than the mine. Like my car, if my car crashed, I'd still be less concerned than if I lost my legs. And if I lost my legs, I'm still more attached to myself. I still didn't die. So the idea is we're very attached to the concept of self, even more so than husband, wife, family. The family is dear because the self is dear. That's what is established in this point. Now, Sukadeva Goswami says that, it's very interesting. Sukadeva Goswami says, O king, for all living entities, one's own self is the most dear. So I'm going to read this, and then you guys can give ideas why you think Gurudev talks about this in relation to this verse, because it's not a very clear-cut connection to this verse, but it's very intriguing to see how Gurudev brings it up. For all living entities, one's own self is the most dear. Although objects that are separate from oneself, such as a son, wealth, or a house, are dear to oneself, they are not as dear as the self itself. The affection one has for them is secondary to the affection one has for one's own self. In other words, there's a difference between I and mine. The amount of affection a person has for the objects he possesses is not the same as the affection that he has for his own self. So the connection Gurudev is tying now is saying, those who consider the body to be the self do not feel that anything related to the body, such as a house, a wife, or a son, is as dear to them as their own body. So this verse is basically saying, don't be too attached to your body, because it's not the real self that you're attached to. It's a misconception. You think the body is the self, therefore you're very attached to it, more so than if someone related to you even, were to come into harm. it's based on self-attachment. But basically, that body is just a possession also. What is the real self? So Krishna is saying here that even though a person's body is the object of his affection, it is not as dear to him as the self, because when the body becomes old, the desire for survival still remains strong. This is due to one's excessive attachment to oneself. So now what's the connection going to be drawn? Why did the Gopas, the cowherd men, have more affection to Krishna than to their own son? And we see this in the story of when Brahma Vimohan Lila, when Brahma stole the calves and the cowherd boys, the parents became more attached to Krishna, who had manifested as replicas of the cowherd boys and the calves. Why was that? So the reason is, Vrindavan, what was the reason? I'll read it. Krishna is the very self of the self. And for that reason, he is every soul's most dear object. The world, which is related to Krishna, is also dear, but not the most dear. Krishna is the object of the word I. I love that quote. When we say I, the object of that word is Krishna. Because he is the soul of all souls. So anything that we're attached to the self because there's a veil of ignorance still keeping us from Krishna or God. But as soon as that veil is pierced or lifted, we realize Krishna is the self of the self, and our attachment to the self was really just bringing us towards attachment to Krishna, because he is the really the self of the self. And so the natural constitutional nature of every living entity is to be attached to the self of the self, the soul of all souls. And that's why when people talk about how I'm realizing I'm like connected to all of existence and it's such a blissful thing, it's because you're trying to get close to the conception of at least a universal truth or a universal form by which you can identify with as some kind of complete interconnectivity, that we are connected to that because Krishna is the self of the self. Anything related to Krishna, such as the universe, is the object of the word mine. That is why Krishna is so dear to the cowherd boys. I'm just going to read that one more time. Krishna is the object of the word I, because he is the soul of all souls. And anything related to Krishna, such as the universe, is the object of the word mine. That is why Krishna is so dear to the cowherd boys. So there's a verse, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Viddhati Kamam. Krishna is the original eternal being amongst all eternals. He is the original conscious entity amongst all conscious entities, and he alone can satisfy all desires. That's why when we sing the Srimad Bhagavatam verse, Jayati Jananivasa Devaki Janmavado, that Vardayan Kama Devam, only Krishna can satisfy all desires. And so whatever we want, without Krishna will not be truly satisfied. So the Rolling Stones, I can't get no satisfactions because they have not approached Shri Krishna. Unlike Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven, the Piper is calling us to join him. So if we go to Krishna, then we can find satisfaction. Without that, we will always be searching for it in this world, chasing after the mirage of material happiness, always disappointed. So going back to the verse, never was there a time when I did not exist. Krishna starts it with the subject I, because without Krishna, the whole tree of existence collapses. Without the self of the self, there is no self independently, because Krishna is that. What does it mean to be the self of the self? It's a very interesting concept. Any ideas?
Super self.
The super self.
I have a doubt.
Soul. Yes.
Well, when we say we have a soul or self, that kind of implies that the body is bekar, useless.
Not necessarily.
Or,
it's
you know,
an
like,
object.
it's not us.
It's a
It's
possession.
Yeah, but it's not really us. So
So-
when they say he's the self of the self, I'm feeling like that implies the soul is kind of like, but that's just, how would you clarify
I think he's
that?
trying to
Srila
say that he's
Prabhupada
the
said
most
it's
dear.
part and parcels. That's how Srila Prabhupada would put it.
So we cannot be satisfied. We're a part of the whole. Without being connected to the whole, we will not be fulfilled. So Krishna being the self of the self is to say that Krishna is,
He's like the thread running through us.
he says that in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, that I am that thread upon which everything rests. And so without Krishna, we don't have any foundation to our life and existence. Meaning without God or without connection to him.
Say that phrase again, the I. Krishna is the object.
Krishna says, Krishna is the object of the word I, because he is the soul of all souls.
I am not the doer.
I is.
I am not the doer? Is that a paradox?
Capital I is.
Double cap I.
Krishna's the doer. But
Everything
Krishna
in
is
this,
I.
we say everything
So
is
if I
either
am not the
functioning by
doer-
the material energy or the spiritual energy. So when we come under Krishna's energy, then Krishna's superior energy is the doer, and we are serving it. And when we're under the material energy is the doer, and we are its servants. The three modes of material nature, we are serving them as we are their instrument of acting in this world. And so we think I am the doer, but we're acting by goodness, passion, or ignorance, or some mashed up of that. We're not the doer. We're just like a worker, like a foreman who has a worker and he tells him what to do, like we're doing. Rohit is the doer. We are his instruments.
So you're saying Krishna has all these energies, these Shaktis,
Yes.
and so the object is Krishna.
That's why Srila Bhakti Srila Goswami Maharaj talks about it's like everything is meant to be an offering to Krishna. So when Krishna says Yagyartat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana, do yagya for me, otherwise you'll get bound by karma. And he says, whatever you do, yat karosi yadasnasi yajdahosi drasi yadit pasyasi kunteya tat kuru swamarapanam, whatever you do it for me.
Just thinking, just thought it was very interesting that he felt that those layers going up. That to us our body is like whatever.
Temporary,
Then when you say Krishna is the soul of the us, then but what's more like maybe this helps is like we say we're not the body, therefore this is a whole way of saying like one and difference because we are one but we are not him. We are.
By saying he is the self of the self, does just imply that he is the most dear. He is well, and the Brahma Samhita, he is the original flame that lights all other flames or other conscious entities.
he's the reason for it all.
So if you think of us as leaves on the tree of existence, if there was no tree of existence, we would not exist
I
as a
think
leaf.
that
We are not the tree of existence, we are a leaf on it. Without the tree, we have no existence.
I think therefore I am.
Krishna thinks, therefore we are.
Therefore I is.
Anyway, how's it connect to this statement? I feel like Krishna is trying to establish to Arjuna first, don't be so attached to your physical material reality. Understand that we are permanent. So what I was thinking to discuss is that what is important about this life knowing that we're living forever? What is important about this life knowing that we never were not existing, we will never not exist? So what is the importance of the here and now?
That's the hurry. Yeah.
Opportunity.
Well, Gurudev tells the story. There was a blind man and he was wandering in search of sustenance, and he came upon a person who said, go to this kingdom where they take care of people very nicely like you, and it's very close ahead. You'll find a wall. When you hit the wall, walk along it holding your hand to it, and you'll find an entry, enter into it, you'll be taken care of like a king. He hits the wall, he starts walking along it, takes him a long time, he gets tired of it, he starts doubting the advisor, he takes his hand off for a minute, scratches his head, sits down, maybe goes to sleep or something, starts again the next day, hits it, but moved a few feet ahead, and in that moment, when he took his hand off, he missed the door. And so human life is described to be that exit point from the bondage of samsara. So that wall was 84, not miles, you would say yojanas. 84 yojanas for 84 lakh yoni. And so the human life, it said, Mahat Seva Dwaram Ahor Vimuktis Tamo Dwaram Yoshita Sangi Sangam. The door to salvation is Mahat Seva Dwaram. And the door to Narak is Yoshita Sangi Sangam. Over excessive attachment towards sense gratification embodied by the form of the Joshit
Yoshi Sangi Sangha.
And the ones.
and those attached to that.
Yeah.
Therefore, that's why, that's
And
the
he said
danger
more
of,
dangerous.
More
there's
dangerous.
nothing wrong with Grihastha ashram. It's exalted, but it's the danger of becoming completely like the Bilva Mangal Thakur, where he gave up his duties to his father to go and see the prostitute because he was so excessively attached. That leads you towards a hellish condition. It's not that man or woman are bad, it's just that excessive attachment to the object of the senses becoming their plaything, like Prahlad Maharaj says. Prahlad Maharaj said, actually each of us has at least 5 wives. Each of the senses is a wife. The nose, the sense of smell, the sense of sight, the sense of touch, the sense of hearing. These are all our wives dragging us to enjoy with them in their different areas. And so therefore he says, Yan maitunadi grihamedi sukhamhitucham. If you can tolerate that itch to enjoy the objects of the senses, you will become sober and you can become aloof from the entanglement in this material existence. Therefore, develop dhirastatra namoyati, become dhir. That's what Krishna is teaching in Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is saying this valuable form of life should not be wasted in animal-like activities. Rather, you should use it to engage in the true purpose of your existence, which is developing relationship to the self of the self, the soul of the soul, and thus coming into harmony with all being. And so we are doing that every day. That's why serving in an ashram is a special opportunity, because it enables us to have the chance to realize that Krishna is the center, he is the self of the self, the soul of the soul, and so we can put aside our personal priorities for the sake of the whole. And that is a way to harmonize the individual experience with the supreme individual, which is Krishna. It's not the collective, it's the singular. We want to serve the singularity that is Krishna. And by doing so, we can come into harmony with the entirety of existence. But an ashram is a great opportunity to do that, because now most people live merely for their own maintenance. And that's kind of embedded in us, because since all our different lives, we're worried about, it's not that we do these things because we enjoy them necessarily, but there's fear, like as an animal, if I don't make a house and get enough food and have a mate to pass on my genes, what's going to happen? I'm going to cease to exist because of the bodily conception of life. Krishna is saying, now realize that you're not just the body, and therefore you don't have to be overly concerned about this material bodily maintenance. If you serve me, Krishna says, Yoga Kshema Vahamyaham. I carry what you lack, I preserve what you have. You don't have to worry about anything then. Just serve Krishna knowing that he will provide everything you need, like Sudama the Brahmin. He was just thinking, I'll just do bhajan, serve Krishna. Srivas Thakur Gurudev in his first lectures here, he would say, 1, 2, 3. The first day, Mahaprabhu asked him, you're always engaged in Sankirtan and preaching, you don't work so much, worry about your own maintenance, then what's going to happen? Srivas Thakur said, 1, 2, 3. The first day, if I don't get any food, I'll fast. Second day, I'll fast. Third day, Haribo, and then I'll jump in the Ganga. I'm not worried about my body because it's Krishna's body. And if he wants to maintain it, he'll maintain it. The Vaishnavas take responsibility. It's not to say neglect it. Vaishnavas actually take the mood of Madhya Yashoda. I will maintain and serve everybody. Take responsibility, not just for myself. That's what we learned from Prabhuji. He doesn't take responsibility just for himself. He takes responsibility for everyone that he can, and takes care of them without any desire for remuneration. He's not thinking of like, oh, I'll get this from that. Like, we just see Prabhuji just serving everyone, and then naturally Krishna provides. And so if that's not evidence of Krishna providing for what is lacking, then what is? We saw that here when we were purchasing the ashram. We needed something, and it was very difficult, and then Krishna provided. Vaishnavas provided, and so we have that, and now what we're trying to do is difficult, but we're trying to rise up to the challenge that we are faced with, whatever the situation demands. Earlier this year, we were trying to build a brand new temple. Vaishnavas had a different idea come. We would have had this temple done if we knew that was the plan from the start, but rather it was something else. And we were working with architects, drawing up designs, all that kind of stuff. And then it kind of took a left turn, which is good because then we get experience. Now when we hire contractors, we'll know what we're doing in a sense, and we won't get cheated as easily. We'll be like, hey, you could buy windows for 600 a pop, or we could go to this place and buy them for double the size for 200 a piece. So we're gaining experience that we can serve Krishna with. Gurudev said, I want my devotees to know how to mend shoes and how to speak before 10,000 people. both. If you only know how to give big lectures, you don't know how to do hard work, then it's going to become very easily just an exploitative mentality. Oh, I'll just, go around doing doing this or that and then having everyone serve me. Instead, you learn how to be a sevak. And that's something that's special in Gurudev's line under Prabhuji that we are in, because Prabhuji has that mood that no, we should also do service. We don't want to be the Acharya party, we want to be the labor party. When we were building Gurudev's Samadhi, we were Bhaktivinoda Labor Party. All the receipts of everything we built and everything we paid for was under Bhaktivinoda Labor Party. Prabhuji chose that name. He said, we're the Labor Party. Because, why? Because it teaches us how to really sacrifice and offer our energies directly to Krishna. It's very because sometimes, in Bhakti Yoga it said meditation is very difficult. That's Satya Yuga. We can meditate, we practice meditation, we chant and we meditate, we do Gayatri and we meditate. But it's still pretty difficult. It's Satya Yuga, Dhyan. Kali Yuga is, mind is very restless. Kalir dosha nidhi rajan. There's so many faults by our karma, by our samskars, by the environment that we're in. And so if you offer your energies, body, mind, and speech to Krishna, then it's just a very easy shortcut. It's like us digging the foundation for a temple. What's so special about that? 15 years ago, I remember Prabhuji gave a class and he kept telling us the same thing. Said you can go on walking on the road. On one side of the road there's someone building, on the other side there's someone building. Both appear the same but are completely different. One is doing it for themselves, one is doing it for Krishna. So he said never underestimate the power of building a place for Krishna, because what we're doing is trying to apply this verse, offering our energies to the self of the self as that he is more dear than our own self. Because by doing that, by building a place for Krishna, Krishna is very merciful. Yeyatamang prapadyante tang sathaiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manushya partha sarvasa. He reciprocates with us. But the gopis say, I don't want anything, Krishna. And then Krishna becomes completely bound. That's the only thing that can conquer the heart of Krishna. Because with everyone else, he easily just gives a reward. Take my Shri, take my Jash, take my Dhan, take my Bal, whatever my opulences are, take those. But he doesn't give himself. Bhukti mukti diya, Jan palaya, Krishna bhakti naden, rakena lukaya. He'll easily give you objects of enjoyment or liberation or those things, but he will not give himself, the self of the self, the soul of the soul. But if you don't want anything from him like that, you only want his service, then he is bound to give you himself and his service. Therefore, he told the gopis, Napari ham nirvadya samijam, I am indebted to you. I cannot repay you. If I ask you what you want, you only ask for more and for more and for more service. And so because knowing Krishna is the self, we only offer our energies into the yajna of his service with full conviction that Guru and Krishna will protect us. Rakshishyatiti vishvaso gopi tvevarnantata. That is the cornerstone of this process of Sharanagati, surrender. The faith that Krishna will protect us, and he is our maintainer. And therefore, if we offer everything and we give up the fear of how will I maintain my life if I'm just offering everything to Krishna, how am I going to maintain my life? When Gurudev was, so many of us moved to the mutt, like Krishna, how many years you were in the mutt and not thinking about career and job, but when you left, very successful. Who may have known what circumstances may have played out if you hadn't spent that time in the mutt, but spending that time in the mutt wasn't a detriment to the necessities of your life. That's my point. And so whatever energy and time you give to the service of the mutt, that's directly offering the yajna to Sri Krishna, and then you don't have to worry. And devotees, simple living, high thinking, we don't require too much facility. Ishavasya midam sarvam yat kinsha jagatam jagat. First verse of Isha Upanishad, Krishna says, everything is allotted to you according to your karma, according to your birth. Therefore, you should be satisfied with what is yours or your rightful allotment and not try to possess that which is meant for others. So if you follow that principle in life of satisfaction with what is naturally accumulated for you, with your own effort ultimately as well, but not overly possessive, then you'll never have problems in life, especially devotees. You see, devotees are always okay. So we are here. We are trying to serve Guru and Vaishnavas. Not every time is the same. It's not like we are builders by trade. That's why you have someone who is a builder by trade guiding you. But we are sevaks, and whatever duty demands, we will happily oblige. Therefore, in doing so, we can try to please Srila Gurudev. Srila Gurudev, we hear stories. Param Gurudev, in one night, he converted a cemetery into a beautiful garden for the service of Hari Guru Vaishnavas. In one night. In a day, he transferred the samadhi of Srila Gorakshadass Babaji Maharaj that was being taken away by the Ganga, and he brought it over. Imagine how difficult that was. A samadhi of Srila Gorakshadass Babaji Maharaj that was being swept away in the Ganga, and he took their men, and he saved his Param Gurudev for Bhaktivinoda Prabhupada's pleasure. So therefore, Prabhupada called him Kriti Ratna, the jewel of all action. And we are followers of that Param Gurudev, and we are followers of Shrimati Radharani, who is Kriya Ishwari. She is the Ishwari, or the Lord of all kinds of action. And so we are active by nature. We are not meditators. We meditate, but when we meditate, we are serving. That's the difference between bhakti yogis and transcendental meditation, all these other things. They're just meditating on nothing, or on peace and quiet, or on actualization of some material desire. When we meditate, Manasi Seva, because we are followers of Srimati Radhika, her servants, and Param Gurudev, Srila Gurudev. Srila Gurudev, when he joined the mat, he built the pandal. He cooked. He went on Bhiksha. And he built Devananda Gaudiya mat. He would go to the Ganga, collect sand, and bring it for the mat. And he would do that for weeks on end. And so it's Krishna's merciful arrangement that we have an opportunity to engage in his service by helping to prepare his kunj for Seva Kunj. Otherwise, if we were to build it from scratch, it'd only be contractors and excavators, and we don't even get to have because we were thinking, oh, this simple project, so we don't have excavators and backhoes and things like that. But now we're getting to be the excavators, we're building the foundation, and that's such a great thing. In this life, that's why I was saying is, what's the importance of this life now, when we're never going to die, when we're never dead, we're always existing? What's the speciality of this life? Because in this life we have an opportunity, we've come into association with Hari Guru Vaishnava. We can make this offering, we can offer this life and make our entire existence successful by connecting to the self of the self, the soul of the soul, Sri Krishna. And by doing so, become forever blissful. Hare Krishna. Hridayanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Mahaprasad ki jai.
You don't have back.